Okay, we've seen this before. We need to remind ourselves of this. I have 3 workers. The 3 workers get paid by the ditch. We go out and we dig irrigation ditches on farms, and that's what we do. And I don't like one worker, and I give him a spoon, and I sort of like another worker, and I give him a shovel, and I'm friends with my 3rd worker, and I give him the backhoe. Who's going to dig the most holes? Okay? Well, the guy with the backhoe is going to dig way more ditches than the guy with the shovel or the guy with the spoon. All right? You want to be effective, you need to mix the capital with the labor in the right way. All right. So here's a beautifully exciting example. So I have 4 workers. If you can see those are 4 little guys in hard hats. Hopefully you can see the 4 little guys in the hard hats. And I have 4 shovels. So I have 4 workers and 4 shovels. Everybody with me there? All right. And I'm digging holes. I'm digging ditches with 4 workers who have 4 shovels. Now, what happens if I add a 5th worker and don't add a shovel? Well, if each of those 4 workers was digging 1 ditch a day with 1 shovel, what do I get by adding that 5th worker? Well, maybe those workers took breaks. So maybe those workers actually only worked 7 hours a day instead of the 8 that I'm paying them for. And maybe that 5th person can work those extra hours, so that person could actually shovel for 4 hours or something. But we're not going to get as much output out of that worker who does not have his own shovel as we do out of the other 4. Does everybody see that? If I got 4 workers and 4 shovels and I add that 5th worker, what's he going to do? Go get lunch? Bring it back to us? Work during break? There's a whole lot less work for that person to do. On the other hand, if I give that person a shovel, now I got 5 workers and 5 shovels, now I should get a lot more output. Okay? What happens if I add... What happens if I had a shovel without a worker? Well, what's the value of that shovel? Yeah. Okay? So there's a point here. That point is that if we add either labor or capital while holding the other one constant, so we keep the same amount of labor and we add capital, or we keep the same amount of capital and we add labor, when we do that, we get this thing called diminishing marginal productivity. We get something that means we're going to get less output per worker. Right? Our output per worker is not going to increase as fast. So if I keep adding workers and don't keep adding shovels, each worker is adding less to my company than the workers that came before. If you go to a place like Chipotle where they have a counter and you go down and there's people working and making burritos and stuff for you, if there's one person working, it's helpful to add a second person and a third person. But you reach a point where you add another person and that person's just helping out and filling in, and you're not getting a whole lot out of that person. You add another person, maybe they have very little to do. They can, right? There's a right number of people to work that line to really make it smooth. And adding more people it might add a little bit, but it doesn't really add much in the way of production. That's diminishing marginal productivity. How are we going to fix that? Well, A, we can make sure we have the right mix of labor and capital. And B, we can improve the quality of either the labor or capital. Yes? We can get better shovels yeah. Can we graph this? And I'm asking that question rhetorically because you know I'm an economist and of course I can graph anything. So yes. Technological change is an important driver in this. The picture down at the bottom is a U.S. Navy vessel called the Enterprise, and then up on top we have a future Enterprise. All right, technological change drives. Where do we get technological change? Well, one, we get better machines and equipment. That Enterprise at the top is way more fun than the Enterprise at the bottom, yes? Yeah, hopefully. Number two, we get better what we call human capital. Human capital is the experience, training, and skills of the workers, right? So it's my innate ability, by training my skills, by training my employees better, they improve their human capital, they can work harder. That's why we send people to college. College-educated folks are just better, right? Even during an economic downturn, places that don't require a college education still prefer to hire college graduates because they think college graduates in general work better, work smarter, okay? Their human capital comes into play. And technological change includes better means of organizing and managing your company. So the Japanese did not create a lot of new technology in their growth spurt. Japan went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to one of the richest countries in the world. And the technology that they improved was generally the technology of organizing and managing businesses. And I'll give you an example of this, which is just-in-time inventory management. General Motors, Ford, big auto companies used to order parts 2 or 3 months before they needed them because they wanted to make sure they got there. If there was a problem in the supply chain, they didn't want that to slow up production. So they would bring in their inventory and always have 2 or 3 months of inventory on hand. Well, that's highly inefficient for 2 reasons. One, if your orders change, you've already bought stuff and now you're in trouble because you spent money on stuff that you're not going to use, right? And 2, there's a cost to doing that. You paid the money out, and that extends the amount of time before you get your money back by 2 or 3 months, and that's bad business. Okay? So the Japanese practice just-in-time inventory management. They taught us, and lots of other companies do this now. It's kind of the normal standard for things, but the Japanese companies started it. If you're going to build a car in the afternoon, just get the parts delivered in the morning. That gives you flexibility. Someone can cancel the order the day before and you didn't get the parts, so it didn't cost you anything. That just-in-time inventory management makes your company way more efficient, and that's a form of technological change. That's just like inventing a better machine. You're more efficient because you figured out how to use what you have in a more efficient way. Yeah? Okay, so we're going to draw a graph. That's not the graph, but I just put that up there to remind you that we're about to draw a graph. So when you see the letter Y, that's GDP. When you see the letter L, that's labor. When you see the letter K, that's capital. And if you say, why do we do this? Well, GDP is our income, but we already used I for investment. We already used C for consumption, so we're going to use Y for income and K for capital. Y divided by L is output per worker. It's that thing that we want to grow, right? It's that labor productivity, that the higher it is, the better off we are. So it's output per worker, output per hour that workers work. And K over L is the capital to labor ratio, which is the amount of capital we have per worker per hour that the workers work. If you take a list of the real GDP per capita list, and you get another list which is the capital labor ratio in countries, those 2 lists are almost the same. In other words, the richest countries in the world are the countries that have the highest capital labor ratios, and the poorest countries in the world are the countries that have the lowest capital labor ratio. Okay? It's capital that makes labor productive. I don't know how many times I can say that. It's capital that makes labor productive. So here's the graph from the Solow growth model. This is Solow's graph. Solow's graph. The graph of Solow. Up the y-axis is output per worker, Y divided by L. And across the x-axis is the capital labor ratio, capital per hour worked here. Okay? This graph is not a straight line. And why is it not a straight line? The line on this graph, this line here in the middle, all right, that's a line for the constant amount of labor. labor, all right? And as we're moving up this line, 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 we're we're adding capital to our labor. So we have a certain amount of labor. We have, 100 million workers. As we add capital, we're moving up this curve, and our income, our output per worker, our income is going up. So as we add capital to our labor, we're better off. But, remember shovels and peoples. As we add capital, and we're holding the amount of labor we have constant, that capital makes us better off and better off and better off and better off, but better off at a, yes, don't complain about that, at a slower and slower rate. So we're adding shovels to the same number of workers. At some point, the shovels aren't really helping us. Okay? We have diminishing marginal productivity of labor as we add capital and capital and capital without adding workers, or diminishing marginal productivity. Okay? Are you with me there? You with me there? Hopefully you're with me. How do we get around that? Well, if we add capital and labor at the same time, our capital labor ratio stays the same. So if we have 100 million people and we're here, and we add capital as fast as we add workers, we just stay at that point. That point is a constant capital labor ratio. So if I open more and more Chipotles, and in every Chipotle I have 4 workers on the front line, and I keep building new Chipotle 4 workers, new Chipotle 4 workers, new Chipotle, I stay right here. Okay? It's if I add new Chipotle and I have to add more workers, that I start moving this way. Okay? Or I'm adding more capital to my 4 workers. So I've got 4 workers here and 4 workers here with more capital, 4 workers here with more capital. Okay, I keep making my Chipotle bigger. I'm not getting the output from them. All right, if the capital labor ratio is constant, I stay at a point. If my capital labor ratio is changing, then I slide up and down the curve. And you're like, yeah, who cares? We care. We're economists. Nobel Prize for this. Nobel Prize. Okay? The trick here then is to do what? Number 1, we want to add labor and capital together. Or number 2, we'd like to be able to move the curve, right? What we want to do is be up here somewhere. So we, instead of the curve being like here, we want it to be up here somewhere. How do we do that? Good question. Okay? Remember that the shape of this is because we have diminishing marginal productivity. As we add more capital to our existing stock of labor, the value of adding that capital increases at a decreasing rate. Okay. This curve, here's cool thing number 1. On this curve, technology is constant. If I want to improve the position of the curve, what do I need to do? I need to improve my technology, don't I? That's what I need to do. So I can move the curve up by adding capital, or I move up the curve by adding capital, right? So the curve stays in the same place. As I add machines, I stay on the curve and I slide up the curve. If I improve technology, I can move the whole curve. Got that? So, as I'm going from here to here to here to here, I'm adding capital. If I go up here, if I go from here somehow up to here somewhere, that's because I improved technology. Okay? I don't make, when I first add capital, I get a lot of gains for that. The more capital I add, the less gains I get for that. Right? I need either improve my capital or I need to add more labor to go with the capital. All right? How do we add capital? Good question, huh? These are all good questions. You can't wait for the answer. Remember that our capital stock comes from investment. When an economist uses the word investment, we're not talking about you going out and buying a share of stock. Your stockbroker calls that investment because your stockbroker wants it to sound cooler than saying you're saving. But really, when you and I go out in the stock market and we buy a share of stock, we're just savings. It's just a form of savings for us. Investment means you're buying capital. You're buying a factory. You're buying a strip mall. You're buying machinery to go in your business. You're buying tables for your restaurant. You're buying a truck to haul stuff around. You're buying a van. You're buying an airplane. You're buying capital to be part of your business. Okay? So where does investment come from? Well, remember that investment comes from savings. Investment and savings are tied together. Savings in our economy is always equal to investment. So that seems like the easiest way to increase investment would be to increase, savings. If there's more savings, the market should turn that into more investment. Okay? That's underlying this theory. But, again, cool thing about this theory. Trade-offs. Economics, we always have trade-offs. There's no such thing as a free lunch. We can't just add capital without it costing us something. There's an opportunity cost. We create a trade-off. And what's the trade-off? Well, if I take my income and I save more, I'm spending less. Yes? Is that true? It's true. When I save more, I consume less. So if S goes up, C goes down. I got less stuff. This is Benjamin Franklin. Right? A penny saved is a penny earned. Think about this. If I put more capital in the system, my income goes up. To put more capital in the system, I have to consume less now. So if I consume less now, I get to enjoy life less now because I'm saving more. I have more income in the future, and over time, my total consumption could be higher. Let me be clear about this. In this world, the way to maximize my consumption is not to try to maximize it right now, is to try to maximize it over time, which means now I need to save more so that I can consume more in the future. It's like saving for retirement, right? This is such a big deal. They have things like golden rule paths where you figure out the right amount of savings to give up to give yourself the maximum amount of consumption over time. So you want to consume more over time, but you can make those gains in the future bigger than your losses in the present if you know how to save now, how much to save now, so that you can make those gains in the future. It's so exciting.